Hello, everybody. I found something special today. This will be episode 24 of Journeys Through Time. This is a special episode for me and for a very good friend of mine that I grew up with and graduated high school with in Gruver. This is the Price Miller story, essentially. This is Price Miller. When I was growing up in Gruver and I was a young kid, running around with one of my best friends, Teague Ferguson. We rode our bicycles all over Gruver, Texas in the early 80s together, and he was always talking about Uncle Price. Price Miller lived across from the football field in Gruver, and this is his recording on KRDF radio in 1974. He would have been 72 years old. So if any of you know Opal Wallen, this is her uncle. That would be Teague Ferguson's grandmother. So Opal is still with us and alive in Gruver, and I haven't seen her in a while, but I can't wait for her to listen to this because I know that she will love it. I think she's living in the house that Price built, that Price and his wife Bebe built. And I don't think Price and his wife had any kids. He sold the farmland that he talks about in this episode to his nephew, which I think is T.C. Harvey, married to Lou Miller, which would have been Price's. I guess it had been Price's niece, or it had been Price's sister. I can't remember. I don't know. I'm trying to decipher everything that's in our volume 2 because the Sterling Price Miller story is in here and the Price Miller story is in here. It's on page 183 in volume 2. I'm going to start referring to this as often as I can. This is a great episode because he talks about farming, and this land that he's farming, my dad ended up with it because I think T.C. Harvey sold it all, and my dad ended up with a couple sections of this land that was Miller land, and there's a lake on it called Miller Lake. I think there's about 17. Well, it's probably 3 sections, so it's close to 1,700 acres and a quarter or something that we farmed and grazed as I was growing up. So there's a whole lot of connections. There's a big web of connections here between my family and that land, and then of course my buddy Teague Ferguson's family in that land, and so this is small town America. This is what it is in Hansford County. I mean, any given piece of land can be connected to several families, over time, or to only one family over time. It just depends on how things go. Very interesting stuff today, episode 24. I'm sure that I don't have everything accurate on the connections with Opal Wallen and T.C. Harvey and Price Miller, and I'm hoping that someday maybe we can have Opal on and she can tell some stories, and that would be great. But anyway, thank you all so much. Again, Happy New Year, episode 24.
Someone who's impressed me right off the bat, first time I've met him officially. I've seen this gentleman around our area, both here in Spearman and over in Gruver, but there was no way that until he told me so this morning that I could believe he'd been around this area as long as he had. My guest is Price Miller, and Price, you're from Gruver, and it sure is nice of you to make the drive over here today.
Thank you.
How long have you been around Hansford County?
Since 1909.
It's hard to believe. Now, let me ask you this. If you don't want to answer, you don't have to, but I've just got to ask the question, how old are you now?
72 in January, last January.
My goodness, as our secretary said this morning, this area must really agree with you. You're not only well preserved, I think you get younger with each passing day.
I'm afraid now when I start to do work, I can tell the difference.
It's probably not as easy to put in a full day as it was 20 or 30 years ago, but I'll bet you make your mark, don't you?
Try to.
Price, we'll be back to talk more with you, and more especially about what a young whippersnapper like myself can refer to as the good old days because I really wasn't here and don't know. But I want to find out in talking with you. We'll be back to visit with Price Miller right after this from the Jailbrook Insurance Agency. Price Miller is my guest today, and we're talking about when Price first came to this part of the country. Price, where did you come from?
We came from Montague County. We spent 1 year in Collinsworth County, Texas.
That's down in the South Plains? And
No, that's on down up from Fort Worth and Dallas, down in there.
Oh, I see, central portion of the state.
Yes.
Now, when was it you came here in 1909? Did you just sort of pioneer and come up here in a big Cadillac?
A Cadillac full of mules. No, my father came out here in 1902 and bought land. And then we moved out here in 1909.
Well, I'll be. Now, did you move up here in covered wagon?
Yes, sure did.
This is amazing to me. I spend a good deal of time on the road today, and a fairly comfortable automobile. And it's hard for me to imagine people traveling over this country back in those early days of the turn of the century in a covered wagon. Were there roads and markers to follow?
Well, they just, I don't know what kind of roads you call them. There wasn't graded roads or anything, you know, just out across the prairie.
Sort of chug holes.
Yeah, just cattle trails, I guess you'd call them.
Well, you were pretty young when you came into this area, and probably don't remember too much about the trip. But are there any of the things about the trip that you recall?
Well, not especially. I can remember crossing the Canadian River. I can remember that. Quicksand, you could just see it quiver, you know, out around the wagons. I can remember that.
Being new to the area, how did your father manage to find a crossing?
Well, I don't remember that. I was too young.
All you knew was that you got across safely.
Yeah.
How many were in the family?
There was my father and mother and sister and brother and me. 5 of us came out here.
So you came out here, and where did you, when you got up here, where did the land lie that he had purchased?
Well, it's just a little south and east of where the Bernstein elevators are.
Now that's north of Gruver.
Yeah, northeast of Gruver. Mm-hmm.
And do you still own that land and farm it?
Well, no, we sold it last about a year ago to one of my nephews.
But you'd had it all these years.
Yes. My wife and I bought land then that lays right east of the Bernstein elevators there that we first moved to. There wasn't any improvements on this land he had bought, and there was a house there, so we moved on that land. Stayed there about 4 years till he built down on the land that he had bought.
Evidently, you like this part of the country, Price.
Well, that's all I know.
And probably don't want to know much about any other part.
I don't want to move.
I don't blame you. Price, what was it like as a young man growing up here? Here it is, 1974. In fact, the date today is March the 6th, 1974. A lot of time has gone by the board since you first came here, but what was it like growing up in this area?
Well, it's hard to explain, I guess, George. We just, we had to make our own amusement, you might say. Wasn't anything to go to. It's too far to try to go to town anywhere, you know. So we just have literary societies and things like that around the little old schoolhouses.
Did you have weekend socials and dances and things like that?
Yes, we had quite a few dances and things like that.
But
play parties, they called them.
You didn't import talent from Nashville or anything like that, did you?
No.
No, a little hard to do. Well, Price, what kind of, when you came up here, there weren't any such things as irrigation engines, and you had some pretty rough times with dust storms and high winds and so forth. How did you learn to overcome these obstacles and problems?
Well, we didn't have too many dust storms until the country was plowed out. See, it's practically all grass when we came here. It was very little in cultivation. And we didn't have too many dust storms back in the 30s there. You see, we had 1 or 2, but not too many back in the 30s. Of course, then we just had to do the best we could. But back in those days, well, we didn't have dust storms to speak of. Just practically everything was grass in this country. When we came here, I don't guess it was, I'll say 1/10 of the county that's plowed out.
When you came up here and started working the land, of course you didn't have the big luxurious enclosed tractors with the air conditioning and FM AM radios and all this, air heaters and so forth. What'd you do? Did you just get out there with a team of mules?
Yes, mules and walk and plow most of the time when we first came here.
Now, how old were you when you came to this area?
Let's see, I was 7 years old.
So really, at the age of 7, you spent a lot of your time just growing up and having a good time.
Yes.
But as you grew older and were able to get out in the fields and work, what was your job? What did you have to do?
Well, just general plowing or something like that, just whatever it was. Of course, we raised some row crop, and we'd cultivate that with old one-row cultivators.
Oh, boy. Now, Price, it's been a few years since you had to do it, but do you think if somebody handed you a set of reins with a team of mules on the other end, you could handle the situation?
I believe we could.
I'll bet you could, too. It's kind of like riding a bicycle, isn't it? You never forget how. Well, did you went to school here. What schools did you attend?
Well, it was the old McBride School and then 2-7 School.
Where were these located?
The McBride School was, approximately about 6 miles right north of Gruver.
Are there any traces of that old school?
No, that's gone. The old school that I went to was tore down or something. They built a new one, and it's been tore down now.
My goodness.
But then this other little school was one that was in between the 2 and 7 school districts. So they built a little school down there, and it's far for us to go, about 6-7 miles, and so they called it 2-7. Each district paid half of the teacher's salary, and so that's the
How'd you
reason it was called.
How'd you get back and forth to school?
Well, either walked or horseback.
How long a hike was it?
Well, it's about 1.5 miles down there at that school, but when we're going to McBride, it's about 6 miles. We rode horseback in. My sister and I went one year, I believe, in a bug. The rest of the time, I went horseback.
What was it like going to school in the dead of winter up here?
Cold.
I can feel sure of that. It still is, even when you're inside a
Well,
beautifully heated automobile.
we'd have to start by time is daylight, morning to school to get there, 9 o'clock.
What about
Well,
after school? Could you just go home and sack out for the rest of the afternoon, or what?
Well, no, we had our chores to do all the time. Quite a bit of chores to do. We put in quite a bit of time picking up cat chips to burn.
Okay, this is a good point. This is the way you heated your homes. There just wasn't any timber up here. There still isn't. But this is that and coal that you could get brought down from Guyman, I guess. Was the only source
Guyman
of
and
heat.
Texoma was the 2 points where we freighted to.
Do you ever see any of these old pot-bellied heating stoves or wood or coal cook stoves anymore?
No, I believe they're a thing of the past. I just never do see one.
Anyone that has one certainly has an antique on
They
his
sure
hands.
do.
In fact, I know that James Martin has an antique wood stove that I have no idea how old it is, but it's really fascinating to talk about that old thing and watch it work. A lot of things have changed since then, but did you, when you were a young man back in these days and you were out gathering cow chips and cooking and so forth, did you think that someday it would be different? Did you think, for example, that it would be commonplace to go to the moon?
No, I sure didn't.
Probably never gave it much thought.
I never gave it a thought at all, anything like that. Just, it was a way of life then. Everybody did things.
When your dad brought you up here, did he have any plans for this area? Did he know what he was going to do with the land he'd bought?
Well, I suppose just run cattle, because he always liked cattle and always did buy cattle or something like that, buy and sell cattle, and so he come up here then, and we run quite a few cattle. Not no big herds or anything like that, but we run a few. The
What?
Hitch Ranch and the Wilmoth Ranches was the 2 big ones right around us there when
They were
came
already
here.
established
Oh, yes.
when you came. Now, was were there any townships around?
Old Hansford was down here.
It was there,
Yeah.
and I imagine at that time a pretty thriving
Oh,
metropolis,
yes,
wasn't it?
it was. It's a pretty nice little town.
I'm sure you never thought the day would come when it wouldn't be there anymore,
No.
and the changes made. How'd you get back and forth to places like Guyman? I'm sure you had to go there occasionally for supplies and so forth.
Wagon and teams.
And this was pretty commonplace, wasn't it? You
Oh, yes.
probably met a lot of neighbors driving
Yes,
down there.
we'd go one day, stay all night, and come back the next.
And it was an all-day trip. wasn't
Oh,
it?
yes,
Very
sure
good.
was.
What about your crops now? First of all, your dad came up here to go into the ranching business. What got him started raising crops?
Well, there was a little land plowed out on the place that we moved to up here, and so they naturally put crops in on it, raise feed for the horses and cattle and things.
How much land did you have when you first got here?
He had bought 2.5 sections here in this up in the county when we came here. And then there was 2.5 in this other place we moved on, so we had 5 sections really under control when we came here.
Do you have any idea what he paid for the land?
Yes, I think that I can tell you pretty close. I think he told me that he paid $1,000, 1,600 acres.
My goodness, it's hard to buy 1 acre for that.
Because then there was, I believe it was $1.75 due the state on it, in 40 years, something like that.
In Texas?
No, I just had to pay that to the state. Somewhere,
that's
I don't know just exactly what it was, but it's state land, and you bought it.
It's kind of a homestead operation.
Something like that.
Now, do you think that most of the people came up to this area on this old homestead law based on the fact that they could buy land so cheaply, or was it cheap like that everywhere?
Well, I suppose it was. I know down where we came from, land was cheap. I heard them talking about it. Of course, I can't remember what I was selling for when we left there, but I can heard them talk about it, that it was cheap.
So really, your dad's intention to move up here was just to sort of pioneer some new land?
Just move to the west. Go further west, young man, I guess.
What about the cattle operation? How did you handle the operation and get your cattle to market and so forth?
Well, there was cattle buyers all the time, like Mr. Wilmuth and Mr. Archer used to be one of the buyers here. Carl's daddy, Bob Archer, and Walter Wilmuth, they bought more cattle, I believe, than anyone in this country. They just come around and buy your cattle, You drive them in.
Drive them into their herds, and then I guess they'd drive them to
the market, or where they could ship them.
Where was the nearest railhead for cattle?
Guyman and Texoma.
So really, it wasn't too far a drive.
It was about 30, 35 miles from where we lived.
Of course, now, even 30 or 35 miles driving a big herd of cattle took a considerable amount of time, I guess.
Yes, you couldn't make too many miles. Try to graze them along a little bit, keep them looking good.
What'd they do? Was there water in the Palo Duro and in the branches of the Palo Duro during that time?
Well, as far as I know, there was. Of course, I didn't see the Palo Duro very often.
You spent most of your time out there in that field, didn't you?
Yes, around the place.
Did you, now, what kind of a crop did you put in when you first started farming?
I believe the first crop was some milo maize, I believe, they planted here.
That was about all there was up here for a while, wasn't it?
And I know they planted some corn, and we raised a wheat crop in the next year. We got here in February, 3rd day of February, 1909. Of course, too late for a wheat crop that year, but we raised some row crop and then planted wheat that fall.
You remember, at the age of 7 years old, it might be a little tough to recall, but do you remember what the weather was like the day you pulled into Hansford County?
Well, it doesn't seem to me like it was too bad. I remember stopping at Old Hansford a little while and got some groceries and things there, remember. Going on up the place is about 22 miles, I guess, on up the place. So we had to get going on to get there before night, and I know we got in there just a little before night. I can remember that. And
did you?
It didn't look very good, even to a 7-year-old.
I'm sure it didn't. Now, did you have a place already built to live in and everything?
Yes, there was a house up on this place that joined the land and Daddy had bought, so we moved there.
How long did that house stand?
Oh, I tore it down here, I guess about 8 or 10 years ago, an old house.
That's just amazing to me. Do you think that, and this is no reflection on the contractors of today, our building techniques have changed, our materials have changed, but I just don't believe that there's a house around that can stand that long and stay in anything like good shape.
Not being painted more than once, I guess, during the time it stood.
How big a house was it, Price?
Oh, there's 3 little old rooms. I expect there was probably 500 square feet in it, maybe something like that.
My goodness, it must have been pretty crowded then
It
for
was.
a mother and father and, would you say 5 children?
No, there's 3 of us.
3 children, 5 altogether.
Of course, then pretty soon my other brother moved out this country, and he had a wife and twin boys, just little fellers. So they lived there with us for quite a little while.
Were you the baby of the family when you
Yes.
came up here? And as such, I guess you got spoiled pretty good, didn't you?
Oh, no, no.
No way.
No way you could spoil me.
Price Miller is my guest this morning, and we're talking about the settling days of Hansford County, what it was like when men like Price first came to this part of the country, and going to do a little comparison a little later on in our program. We'll be back to talk more with Price Miller right after this from the Jail Rock Insurance Agency.
He said Dallas was maybe as big as Gruver now.
Some other kind of town, wasn't it? We're talking about when Price is reflecting back on some of the things his dad told him about him moving into the area. Let's just tell our listeners about that, Price. Your dad came from where?
Tennessee.
And how did he get to Texas?
Well, they came by boat down the Mississippi to New Orleans, I believe he said, and then across to Galveston by boat, and then they bought teams and wagons there and came on up across Texas. Father was 10 years old at that time.
You remember him telling you something about Dallas at that time?
He said it was probably the size Gruver is now, something like that.
My goodness gracious.
Said board sidewalks.
Oh, but this makes you wonder if maybe 60, 70 years from now, Gruver might not be the size of Dallas, and who knows how big Dallas might be. We are in hopes that these interviews that we do with gentlemen such as yourself will be preserved for the future and placed in archives in our Hansford County Library. We've made arrangements to do this. And we hope that people many years from now, quite possibly after you and I have long been gone, that they might derive some history, some personal history out of this part of the country. Price, what about your family? Most of them still settled in this area?
Well, there's my sister and me is all that's left of the original. I lost one brother just the 4th day of January. He was killed in a car accident, the last brother I had.
Well, and you and your sister are going to carry the name on for 30 or 40 or 50 more years.
Well, I hope so.
I do too. Price, going back now, let's take your teenage years and after you got out of high school, what were you doing then?
Well, I was just like most any other kid, I guess, around, just helping around the place, you know. We'd farm, things like that. And then along, I believe it was about 1920, I decided I wasn't going to be a farmer, so I went forward and took a barber course. Worked 3 days after coming out of school and quit. Went back to farming.
You figured that field was better than that hair any time, huh? Well, I don't know. With the hair situation being what it is today, some barbers do real well, and then others go out of business in a hurry.
I believe that'd be a hairstylist now instead of a barber.
Yeah, I don't think they have any barbers anymore, really. Now, what about Mrs. Miller? How'd you meet up with her? Did you just see a young lady and say, "That's her, I'm going to marry her"?
Well, just about. No, her father had a threshing machine. He sold it to a fellow, and he moved it out this country, and seemed like he never could do any good with it, so he come out and run it, try to get a little money, I guess, out of it, her father, and so her and her sister and mother, that's all there was of them, there's 2 girls, they came out here to run the machine, and I met her then.
Put your eye on her then. Did your wife's father come out here to thresh your crops for you?
Yeah, he threshed our crops. He came out, I guess, run the machine, I believe, 2 years after he sold it to this fellow, and then they just parked it.
How old were you when you and your wife married?
I was 27.
So you were ready, weren't you?
Just about.
How about your family, Price? Children?
No children, just we never did have any children.
But I'm sure that you and your wife enjoyed each other through all the years of a wonderful marriage, and everything is I guess you just wouldn't change it, would you?
No, I don't think so. I have some nice nephews and nieces, wonderful nephews and nieces, so I just...
Where did you get married? Do you remember?
Duncan, Oklahoma.
You went away and got married and had a little honeymoon? And...
Well, I just went down to see her, and we got married, and then she wasn't going to come out. That was in May, and she wasn't going to come out till after harvest, but I had to have a cook, so I went back and brought her back out for harvest.
You thought, now's the time I need her the most, right?
Well, why? Why pay one had her?
Boy, you could be in trouble this morning, Price. Now,
well, that's what she tells me all the time that I did.
What's Mrs. Miller's name?
Merrill is her name. She goes by Beebe, though, B-E-B-E.
You just call her BB, and
that's what she goes by everybody, though no one knows her name except the insurance companies, I don't think.
Well, I wish you could have brought her with you this morning, but it's a lot of fun visiting with you and talking about these times. Now, going back to the school years, did they have well, naturally they didn't have the kind of schools that we have today, but did the students get good personalized attention when you were in school?
Oh, yes, I think so.
Teachers took good care of you.
Good, and we learned, well, we had to learn because we didn't have very much school. First school I went to was 4 months, and then they would be about 7 months, then the rest of the schools. I never did finish high school. The folks moved down to Wellington, and I went to school there for 2 years. Didn't finish high school, like little finishing.
Well,
19, 19, and 19, I was there.
You've managed to do a fabulous job of educating yourself. I know I talked with you before we went on the air this morning, and you are a very knowledgeable man.
Well, thank you.
I think you stay pretty well on top of everything that's going on in this country. But as you grew older and started working more in the fields and farming the land and so forth, what kind of prices did you get for crops, and did you make a good deal of money at farming?
No, we didn't farm enough land to make money at it. Just a living, you might say. See, we just, I don't know, we did about 200 acres, something like that, always farming.
Still, I guess your mainstay was your cattle business.
Well, we had some cattle, and then, let's see, I guess it was in 24, we bought the first tractor we bought in 1924.
What kind of a tractor was
It
it?
was a little old Fordson.
Did it have all of the fancy gadgets on it that you find today?
It had one of those Armstrong starters on the front end.
Just as strong an arm as you could get, huh?
You bet, it was a Jonah.
Now, was this I remember seeing some tractors from back in the early days, and they had these old steel lug wheels on them.
That's what it had.
Boy, that must have been real comfortable, right?
It was. Especially about half of them get mud in them, you know, and the rest of them without it.
You really felt like you were riding a bucking bronc, didn't you?
It sure wasn't very comfortable. And very dusty.
Oh, I'm sure it was. Do you remember what cattle brought back in the early 20s?
No, I really couldn't tell you. It seemed to me, though, like along about in 1919, they got to be a pretty good price. Well, we thought it was a good price, rather. Of course, nothing like it was here a while back.
What was beef at the supermarket then, do you know?
Oh,
Now, of course, there wasn't a supermarket.
No,
You just went to the family store.
Well, about all we had then was just to kill. Of course, that time, you'd kill a beef and hang it up in the windmill tower and keep for months.
You butchered
Oh,
them,
yes,
didn't you?
yeah, and hogs. Had their hogs butchered them.
Price, do they still do a lot of that, butchering their own beef for
Well,
sending it in
no.
for winter?
There's quite a few that sends it to these butchering places. I don't think there's anyone, I don't know if anyone does it themselves, you know. Have it processed, you know, and freeze, put it in freezers.
Was there any other livestock operations up here? I mean, other than cattle?
Horses. Mr. Hitch used to raise lots of mules. He had lots of mares and raised mules. We'd break mules for him every year because we didn't have hardly enough of our own, so you could go and pick out as many as you wanted and take them and work them for a year. Break them for him free of charge.
And work them, get a year's worth of work out of them. I imagine it was pretty tough breaking a mule, wasn't it?
No, some of them was pretty rough.
I can imagine they were. What happened to that kind of an operation when the tractor became commonplace in the fields?
Well, I really don't know. It seemed like Mr. Hitch took most of his mules back to Missouri to sell. Somewhere back Tennessee and Missouri. He was from Tennessee, and he'd take them, after he'd get them broke, he'd ship a whole carload of them or two back there, and I guess sell them back in that country. I suppose what he did with them.
Of course, they used mules for many other things other than just farming fields, didn't they? You used them for transportation, used them to carry.
Well, not here. We didn't here. No, not in this country.
Well, this was flatland country here.
Yes.
You could get a car over some of these juggles, I guess.
Yeah, wagon. You can pull a wagon most anywhere if you put enough team on it, big enough team.
What about the first car? Do you remember the first car you ever had?
Yes, Father bought one in 1918, a little 490 Chevrolet.
Did it have one of those Armstrong starters on it, too?
No, it had a starter on it.
My goodness, you were in high cotton.
Oh, you bet.
When did you learn how to drive?
Well, I didn't really know how to drive. He bought that, but I had drove a little bit, Model Ts a little, but I never drove a 3-speed car, gear shift.
Boy, you must have really been the hot rod of the county when you got that.
We was up high cotton.
How old were you when you got that car? Do you remember?
I was 16, 1918. Mm-hmm.
Why, you didn't even have a driver's license. Of course, I don't guess anybody else did.
I don't think so. I never heard of anyone having one.
I don't remember when they first came out with the driver's license law, but...
I don't either. I just don't remember when it was.
I know it wasn't... you didn't have them then, I know that.
No, sure didn't. They didn't pay any income tax either then.
No, what you made was what you had and what you kept. What did you do with the money that you made off of your farming and ranching operations?
Well, it took about all of it to live on. Things you'd have to buy.
And invest back into the land.
Yeah.
I guess it's being a farmer or rancher is really like being in any other type of business. In order to be productive year in and year out, you've got to invest in it.
Yes, that's right.
Now, you have retired from the farming operation. About how long have you been retired from the field, Price?
About 5 or 6 years.
And what do you do now?
No, I just work around the yard mostly.
Do you have any trouble staying busy and occupying your mind and your time?
No, not too much of the time. I drive out to farm quite a bit and watch them work.
Do you and Bibi get to take trips and go see the country that you
No,
never
we
saw?
never got to do very much of that.
Have you wanted to, or have you been just content to stay at home?
Not too much. She's pretty much of a home gal. She likes to be at home a lot, and then her mother now, she's in a nursing home in Comanche, Oklahoma. And we go down there about every 6 weeks. Every time we get off, we go down and see her.
Now, do you still maintain a garden out at your home?
No.
Grow vegetables and so forth?
No, we don't do that.
Did you back in the old days?
Oh, yes. Yes, we did. But we moved into Gruver, let's see, that was in 49. Lived on the farm for 49, then we built a home there in Gruver. And we always had a good garden, and she put up lots of stuff.
You
Go
couldn't
through
go to
the-
the supermarket and select all your produce, could you?
No, we bought coffee and flour and things with sugar such as that, and the rest of it we put up.
I'll bet she's a pretty good cook and a pretty good canner, too.
Oh, yeah, you bet your life. She's dandy.
Well, that's probably what's kept you so young and vigorous, is her excellent cooking.
Well,
Price, it's been a real pleasure visiting with you this morning. I've learned a lot about this country up here from talking with people like you, and it always amazes me the things that you did without really taking them into consideration. I mean, you just did them because you lived one day to the next, and really I think that's the best way to live life. But if you reflect back on the way you lived and the things you went through as a young man growing up, what would you change about it, about the past? Do you have any idea?
no, I really don't. It's just, I really think I've lived in one of the best times anyone's ever lived. I've seen so many changes from, you might say, the horse and buggy days till space age. Why, I can't think
What
what
about
better age you ought to live in.
What about a prognostication for the future, from Price Miller's opinion? What's it look like?
I don't know. It looks to me like we've gone as far as we can, but I'm sure we haven't.
Well, I think you're right.
But I just can't think of many of the things he could do. Of course, there'd probably be more space.
Do you think
travel, things.
that we need to become more interested in our own backyard, so to speak?
I think so. I think if we had tend our own knitting and let the other people alone, we'd be better off.
Sort of live our own lives and let them do the same.
I think that would help things wonderful.
Well, I think that would be the answer, really, to solving all of the problems this world is faced with today. And, of course, those problems are, in comparison to some of the problems of the past, not as serious as we might think. Yet we are in a situation where we need to do something. We can't stand still and watch this thing continue to develop.
Well, it'll keep moving on.
And that's what we'll do. And Bryce, I'm sure you will too. And I know that you're looking forward to a long and fruitful and happy life, and you and your wonderful wife, Bibi. And we hope that everything goes just exactly right for you.
Well, thank you.
Bryce, I want to thank you for being our guest this morning. Price Miller from Gruver. And Price, is there anything you'd like to add before we say goodbye today?
No, not that I know of. Only I just hope we don't go back into the Dust Bowl days.
Oh, we can't do that. To go back is the worst thing we can do right now. We've got to go ahead, and I'm sure we will.
I'm sure we won't with the modern tractors and things we have today and the irrigation. I think we keep the dust down now.
Bryce, haven't farmers become more scientific too?
Oh, yes, sure has. It's got to be a big business anymore.
It's not just a matter of getting up at dawn, going out and plowing the field and coming home.
Sure not. It's a big business, and it's a expensive business now, the Price machinery is.
And, too, it's a very calculated business. You just have to be absolutely sure before you make a move.
And you bet, and everybody's, well, a fellow just got to be on his toes, I think, to make it now, farming. We used
Well-
to just kind of haphazard, you know, and we just made a living's all we made. But now you've got so much invested, you've got to.
Well, and two, back in those days, you didn't have as many people to feed.
No, that's right.
Our world is growing by leaps and bounds in population, and the farmer and rancher are the people who have to feed this world.
That's right.
So they've got to be able to produce. Price, it's been real wonderful visiting with you this morning. I want to thank you for making the drive over from Gruver. We'll look forward to having you back again one of these days.
Thank you.
Price
Enjoyed
Miller.
talking to you.
Enjoyed it very much. Price Miller has been my guest on Spearman Information this morning. The program has been brought to you by the J.L. Brock Insurance Agency of Spearman. Coy Palmer will be back with you tomorrow, and his guest will be Tom Jones of Gruver. Say, Price, I'm sure you know Tom, don't
He
you?
lives second house from me.
Next door
Down the
neighbors,
street.
practically. Well, Tom will be with us tomorrow, and we visited with Tom once before. We're looking forward to having him back. And we'll look forward to having you back one of these days.
Thank you,
And again, my thanks to you for being with us.
Well, thank you.
Price Miller has been my guest today.